Chapter 20. Detecting Firewalls. When a challenger is in a reconnaissance phase of their attack, they're trying to gather as much data as they possibly can about the network they're looking at. Unavoidably, one of the things they want to learn about is what type of firewall are they dealing with. Not just what type in terms of what we just looked at, but who makes it, because armed with that information, they may be able to find specific vulnerabilities within that particular manufacturer's product. One of the first things they're going to want to do is fingerprint the firewall. So for example, HTTP fingerprinting of servers. What they're trying to do here is to look at how the device behaves. What sort of ports and protocols are supported? Specific manufacturers' firewall products will expose services over different ports. For example, administration facilities generally tend to be split up on predictable ports, and when that port is discovered, it's often a reliable indicator of who makes that product. Something like port scanning can be done with a tool like Nmap, and indeed, that is the canonical product for scanning networks. That's a good starting point, scanning ports and protocols. Another common technique is banner grabbing. This is not that different from the way we'd see banner grabbing happen against a web server. Make a request to the device, receive a response, and within that response is an indication of who makes the product. In some cases, the system is merely announcing what it is. That in itself is not a risk. But to my earlier point about bad guys using that information to go out there and find known vulnerabilities about the product, it can be a gateway to the attacker, then being able to compromise the system. Therefore, fingerprinting, using those open ports and protocols, and using banner grabbing are two straightforward ways of figuring out what the firewall product is. But hackers often want even more information. They want to know things like the open ports behind the firewall, and that's where firewalking comes in. Let's take a look at how that works. What firewalking is trying to do is establish the ports that are open through the firewall. Typically, a hacker using firewalking is going to break the approach down into two phases. The first phase is when they're going to try and walk through each of the gateways between them and then the destination host, and you may sometimes see that destination host referred to as the metric. The way that can be done is by running trace routes and manipulating the TTL value, aka time to live value, and they're going to keep incrementing it by 1. Each time they increment the TTL by 1, they're going to be connecting to a different point in the connection. They won't get a successful response until the TTL is high enough to hit the destination host. But what the exercise does as it walks through those gateways, it helps them identify the points between that firewalking host and the destination host. This is what's effectively known as hop count ramping. They keep bumping up the TTL until they reach the destination host. That's the first phase that helps them establish the points between the firewalking host and the destination host. They can move on to phase 2, the actual firewalking. And once they're clear about where the destination host is in terms of the proper TTL count, they can start sending TCP or UDP packets from the scanning host to that destination host, one port at a time, incrementing the TTL. They're effectively walking through the available ports and testing each point along the way to see if it's going to respond. If that firewalking host doesn't receive a response for each one of those requests and just times out, well, then they can assume that the packet was denied by the ACL, aka access lists running on that device. That allows the bad guys to work through incrementally and establish at each point along the way, what are you going to support, regardless of what may then be further downstream from the device, what may be the avenues of the attacker to begin mounting their attack. Having gained this knowledge, the attacker can start evading the defenses that are in place in the firewall. Let's start looking at evasion techniques.